Okay. Hello everyone, and good morning. I think from Santiago, yeah, and good evening from Indonesia, and of course, good day here in the UK. And yeah, hi, and I'm so glad you could join us today. And I want to say a big thank you to our speakers. It was a difficult time to get a good time slot, so it's quite early in the morning for Domingo and quite late in the evening for Luhut. But I want to say thank you all for joining this episode, and I'm so happy to have my old classmate with me today. It's amazing.
Yay!
Yeah. So today we're talking about law reform. But before I proceed, I would like to just briefly allow starting from Domingo, just quickly say what you do and just your expertise. I'll go straight to Lohu, then we'll go straight to our discussion. Okay,
O-
Domingo.
Okay, okay, thank you. Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, depending on which part of the world you are. My name is Domingo 𝐑𝐚𝐢𝐥, and I work here in Chile in the Chilean State Railways as a rail professional, mainly working in planning. But I also have experience in operations, like in train scheduling, maintenance work, and even commercial operations with passengers, with a touristic train that we run here. I have been working 10 years in this company and 16 years in the rail industry. So a pleasure to meet you all. Now, Luhut.
Yeah. Thank you, Luhut.
Okay, thank you very much, Domingo. So from my side, my name is Luhut. I'm a consultant in one of the management consulting firm in Indonesia, focusing on government and public services. Most of my clients are rail industry companies as well as ministry. The last one I helped Ministry of Transport to do a little bit of rail reform on the side of interaction between the state-owned enterprise or the network rail of Indonesia and the Ministry of Transport. Also helping on the non-fare box or non-ticketing businesses for a lot of rail companies in Indonesia. So it's a combination or hybrid between business and public policy on the transport sector. Yeah,
Okay, thank you so
thank
much.
you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so let's go straight to the discussion for the day. Please, it'd be good for us to know where you're joining in from, so our audience can just drop your name and possibly the country or the city where you're joining in from. Let's know our audience. That'll be very nice. Also, level form. So let's start. In your opinion, so anyone can take the lead now. What is level form and why? Okay, I know that's a big question. So let's make it something very open. So what is the reform and why the reform? Okay,
Okay, should I go first?
yes, that's fine.
Uh, okay. Yeah, okay. Well, the thing is, when we are speaking about rail reform, it's, well, what do we want to reform in the railways? Because in most of the countries, railways have been a pretty monolithic company, mostly from the state, and they have to keep it with the times. So at some point, what they do is kind of outdated, and they are surpassed, sorry, by the competition. So sometimes you have the drive to do some reform in order to get more income, reduce your costs, have a more streamlined management, in order to survive and to require less subsidies, for example, because in mostly around the world, railway is a subsidized industry, because the market itself doesn't capture all the benefits that the rail system provides. So you have to subsidize it to kind of make a more level playing field. And so you do reforms in order to for example, put more energy or more investments in parts where rail can compete, because railways can get to your home directly. You don't take a ride, a train right from your home, or a train doesn't get to your home to deliver you a parcel. So a train has to focus on where it's most efficient. So that's also a need for rail reform. I think Luhut could provide more insight on that.
Yes, thank you very much. So yeah, it's a very interesting topic because in the UK itself, you've been doing a lot of changes, right, for the past 20 years. I think Domingo is also familiar with that as well. The last one
Mhm.
being the Grand Shops William Review. There has been quite a massive change. So in my thinking on the rail reform is that it's more like you change the game, the rule of the game of rail sector. For example, if we can imagine, for example, like a board game of Monopoly. So
Hmm.
actually, people are doing their best to be like the best player or doing the best bank. But then you know that the gameplay actually do not end up in a like better outcome for the public, a better outcome for the financial positions of the corporate. So you change the rule of the game, you change the structure of the industry, if you like. And by doing so, you want to have the different outcomes, supposedly a better outcome. But you know the idea is that you keep on developing that to match into to make it not outdated, make it more updated, and then now bring in the net zero plans, sustainability aspects, and more sustainable finance as well, and keep on changing and keep on changing. So, like UK is a little bit in the future. In Indonesia is still much lagging, but it's a very interesting topic.
Hmm. Yeah, because sometimes making changes for the sake of making changes, it's kind of attractive. You can always see when politics meets rail, the need to make changes. Oh, we need to make changes because everything is working very bad, so we need to make changes. At some point, you arrive to a point that you get to kind of uh, change everything so nothing changes. So it's not making changes for and I want to emphasize this. You have to make changes to survive, but it's not
Yeah,
making changes just for the sake of making
cycle
changes.
changes.
Yeah, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But yeah, but it's clear that rail, it's kind of slow to react to market changes, and that's what railways need to kind of uh, pick up speed in order to not only react to market changes or condition changes in the network, in the country, in the world, in the economy, but to also try to be preemptive on them, like to know when something is up. It's more like business intelligence and that, and that also requires to have people in the railways that are interested in making such changes and make them right, because that's not a given on rail companies.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Lohu, someone is sending a shout out to you. She said
Oh
Nita from
yeah, hi, hi, hi. I saw Nita and
yeah.
some of my friends as well. They're very, very nice and very supportive team
Yeah, okay.
in
Thank you
Indonesia.
so much. Thank you, Johnny Martins. Thank you, Hadi. Thank you, Vino and Nita. So
Nita,
I would like to
yeah.
hear from the audience why our speakers go on to the next discuss. Can you let us know to you what is rail reform? So you can just type in the comment section now and I'll display it on the screen. So to you, what is rail reform? Okay, so let's come back to I know you to any of you, like I said, I know you mentioned you don't just make changes for changing's sake, but I want us to go into more details. Why the reform? I know this question is not um um okay. So this can be specific to, like you said, to regions or to countries. Again, why the reform? And you can also marry it to the role of role, because people should able to appreciate what the role of role is, the essence of it. Because I feel that it's something that's that important, then you have to do what they call reform. So anyone can take the lead. Yeah.
So yeah, let me just do mine. Uh,
Okay.
so you know there's in the asset management, if you like, there will be like a routine maintenance, right? There will be a overhaul maintenance. um, if you like the example of Monopoly, for example, people are trying to do their best, do a little bit of changes here and there, small skills, but then they will end up in the rail sector that there are certain things that you cannot change because of the like a foundational law, for example. Talking about the hierarchy of regulations, if you like, in UK you have Transport Act, and there are certain things that you cannot do because it's limited by the regulations. And changing that regulation, which is very significant, it's also part of the way of reforming the industry so that the performance can be changed. For example, one thing that is very interesting in the UK case, for example, when we were in Leeds, you know, Northern was often not performing well to the extent of the driver did not
Hmm.
come to the station, you know, and then I need to change into LNER, and the LNER officers are like, what the heck, man? Uh, like, why are you here? But then that kind of idea sort of like accumulates into the idea of maybe rail needs to be led by the government, or at least from the public sector side. I think that's kind of like the thinking of the last review. And for Indonesia case, for example, the reason why we need to do reform is that, for example, when Indonesia right now, almost all of the rail operation, be it infrastructure and the rolling stock services, are operated by one company, which is a big state-owned enterprise. But then there are several small scale of a new rail services that also now being fed into these big companies. And we're thinking maybe it's time to change the way we do the things, because this company is very big, and to some extent they're not that agile, and perhaps you need to introduce some kind of competition so that this big guy can actually innovate and do much better than what they do right now. An example in the Europe actually sees that, um, with competitions, at least to some certain extent of competitions, you actually get a better performance of rail, and it also happened in the UK. So we're actually trying to do that right now. I'm trying to advise for multi-operator schemes, and separation of the infrastructure and rolling stock in Indonesia, and having a very close interaction with the Ministry of Transport in doing so. But a lot of things need to be changed. The way they do like regulation of the separation, the way they do multi-operatorism regulatory, and even the way they see what do you call it, safety from the
Mm.
perspective of different players. Currently, they're only like one player responsible for both infrastructure and rolling stock. But if you separate those and then you have multiple service rail operators, how do you define safety? And then how do you define the business to business relationship between the infrastructure and the service operators or the rolling stock operators? So these kind of things are very complex. There are many, but
Mm.
it's part of a big rail reform, some sort of.
Oh, okay. That
Very
means
good.
yes, you can go on, please.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. Sorry, you meant the next question, or I can elaborate.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. You can.
Ah, okay, okay.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. It's very important what Luhut mentions, because uh, you kind of have both currents of thinking dealing in this case, because railways is a economies of scale industry, right? So when you concentrate more on it and on your operations, you should get less marginal costs on making new services, for example. But it's also true that at some points, some companies are too big to undertake some smaller enterprises or services, for example, and to move, because they are so heavy in headcount, in how they operate, that sometimes it's harder for them to react to the market, as we talked earlier. So at that point, yeah, you can open the market, so some players, some smaller players, uh, for example, from the private sector, can enter the market and use, for example, some spare capacity, or open some markets that the incumbent, the kind of the big state-owned behemoth on the railways can't enter. But you have to make it, yeah, really, really, in a really, or you have to keep an order, because in this case, yeah, private companies have different labor laws than the state, and sometimes you can have cross subsidies. So you have to think very thoroughly to have keep a level playing field for that.
Okay.
It's not so easy as it sounds at some point, and just open the market and that's it.
Okay. So thank you. Before we go further, I just want us to know our audience. So let's know how often the audience use the rail safety, as in, because I'm sure some people don't even use that. Also, how often do you use rail transport? On a scale of 1 to 10, one very, very, 10 very often. So just answer that. So let's come back to our discourse. So I know we're going to talk about rail reform in countries, yeah, but and also with a strong focus in Indonesia, Luhut, and Chile, Dominguez. So let's go straight into that. How do rail system work in Latin America, Indonesia, the reform process, and just to give us context to what you're talking about, can you just tell us a bit about your country to so that people can actually appreciate what you want to discuss about. That will actually help them because I've not been to Chile and I've not been to Indonesia, but I can use Google Map. But it's always good that when the speakers give us context and explain what they want to explain. So, how the way system work in Latin America and Indonesia? What's the reform process? What's the experiences? What's the lesson learned? Then it can also when we get, I think after that we can now like compare to like other countries or other continents. Yeah, so it's a full discussion. You should just go with the flow. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
Well, in the case of Latin America, I need to make some context because
yeah.
a lot has changed. A lot has changed in the last, I don't know, 30 or 40 years. Um, like by the end of the 1980s, most of the countries in Latin America mostly had state-owned companies that had rolling stock services, infrastructure, and all that. And considering a change of politics and economics in South America by those years, mostly because all of South America was under the military dictatorships, a new current of economics was centered. That it was like mostly a view on railways as something that had to survive on themselves. So most of the railways in South America, of the private or the public companies in South America, were divided and mostly privatized or via concessions, and in some small cases, selling all the assets and maybe keeping some state-owned operations just for passenger trains in around big cities, and that's it. So for example, some countries had very good results. For example, Brazil right now has concessions that last for, I don't know, 30 or 50 years to freight companies, and that has led to an expansion of the network, a lot of freight joining the system from the roads. So it has been very efficient, and it's one of the most efficient railways in terms of freight transport in Latin America. And if you consider Mexico too as part of Latin America, yeah, those them also had kind of the same system with concessions, and they thrived on that. The counterexample is Argentina, for that had also concessions, but just for 20 years. And considering the weird macroeconomics and politics that they had in Argentina and a constant turmoil, they didn't work well. And if you add a few drops of corruption, well, that doesn't really let you grow as fast or as sustainable as you would like. So right now they are dropping a lot of subsidies and
Yeah.
kind of returning it to a state, and de facto running from state. And in Chile, Chile is the weird example of Latin America where everything still stayed in the state, but we sold the freight system to private sector. So private operators run freight on the state-owned system, and the state still owns the tracks and runs the trains with the same company. So that's kind of the overview of Latin America right now, and what is expected of Latin America, I can speak of my case in Chile, is try to reduce the lenience on subsidies and try
Okay.
to reach an EBITDA of zero, so the operations can sustain themselves. That's kind of the outlook here in South America.
Okay. Thank you so much. Should we hear from Indonesia?
Yes, sure. Can you hear
Okay.
me well? Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Yes.
So a little bit of context. Can I
Yeah.
share my screen?
Okay,
Yeah,
please. Yeah.
yeah. No, I don't have a slide. I just gonna show you this.
Okay.
Give me a second.
Okay.
Can you see it?
No, I think it's coming up.
Not yet.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Give me a second. Yeah. I think I've seen it. Yeah. Okay.
Cool. It's there.
Yeah.
There we
All right.
go.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know Indonesia, Indonesia is right over here on the east end of the world, nearby Australia, and we are compared to Europe is actually more extensive. So this is the whole Indonesia, and then Europe is somehow quite similar. But this little guy over here, the island of Java, has more people than United Kingdom, more people than Germany. So roughly about 100 million. So this island of Java and this island of Sumatra actually consists of most of the population of Indonesia, as
Mhm.
well as most of the tracks of the railway stock. So here we go. This is the islands of Indonesia. Right next to Singapore over here, very small dot, and then Malaysia, Thailand, those very interesting countries, and Philippines as well. China is on the top, and Japan over there. So Jakarta here and Java has all the tracks, or most of the tracks for railway, and has been historically uh, been the center of the economy. More than 60% of the GDP, roughly about 60% of the GDP. And if you add this island of Sumatra, it's roughly about 80% to 90% of all. And in terms of rail operation, it was back in 100 years ago or so, run by concessions as well. Most of them actually plantations, such as sugar canes and the likes of it, uh, in several area of plantations. But then by the day of the Independence Day of Indonesia, back in 1945, uh, all are being nationalized. So it's about the same time where British Rail was being nationalized by the government of UK. So Indonesia was privatized, and also having the same kind of issue of aging infrastructure, and then non-expansive network and declining services. But while UK actually make some progress back in 90s, in Indonesia it was actually started by 2000 something. It was initiated by, let me just stop sharing here. Uh, it was just started by the change of regulation or law, in which by 2007, uh, which was previously only that one SOE allowed for doing all the rail work, infrastructure, and the rolling stock. By 2007, it was allowed that other companies can do that as well. And it was followed by several regulations that explain about that and regulate that further. So since 2007 into now 2022, we're having a lot of changes, the reform impacts, if you like. So now we have not so many, but about like 20 to 30 kilometers of MRT system in Jakarta. It was a very good systems from Japan, and the other one is coming from South Korea. And it brings a very different sense of doing railway in Indonesia. Whilst the remaining 5,000 kilometers of network was being revolutionized as well, starting from roughly 2012 to 2015. But it was primarily being done because of the strong leadership of the CEO. So back then it was, if you do do some Google back, like you can see like 2009, 2010, or 2011 of Indonesia Rail, you will see maybe today's railway in several parts of India where people are actually climbing on top of the rail, and then do that, risking their life for commuting. um, but it was completed and ended by 2012, and then being rationalized more and more and more until up today. And currently we are building the automated LRT system in Jakarta area, the capital city, and also building our first high-speed rail, finally. It's going to come in the next few years, hopefully, but it's keep on being delayed, similar to that of Crossrail and HS2. Headache,
Mhm.
but it's coming. I don't know when, but it's coming. So we're seeing a lot of changes. The rail sector, and then there will be more operators coming as well, more PPPs as well, public-private partnership in the rail sector. But the key challenge would be in the rail sector in Indonesia would be how to change the way the regulator is doing the regulations or doing the governance, basically. Because if you change the industry, then the policymaker, the regulator, needs to change the way they're thinking as well. And that's where I think the fun is, because I'm working with them, shaping the way they see railway sector, and changing the policies as well, and how to introduce new ways of doing policy making. But it's pretty much moving. Hopefully we can, I'm doing benchmark to UK, Australia, New Zealand, and some Commonwealth countries, and keeping track on the way they do changes as well, like the UK right now. But as we mentioned before, Domingo mentioned that things keep on changing even on yearly basis and the way to things. So uh, yeah, there will be like snapshot of Indonesia as well. If you want to see some pictures, I can show it as well. But
Okay, that's fine.
yeah,
We can.
yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, Domingos. You want to add to that before we move on? You have anything to add?
Um,
Yeah.
no, in the end, just to kind of end the idea that Luhut mentioned, the one thing that most of the states around the world wants from the railways is that they know the railways are good, they know all the benefits that they carry, and don't reflect on the market, on monetary income, you could say. But in the end, nobody wants to keep subsidizing them so for so long. So it's like, okay, we know that you railways are very important. We know all the things that you bring to our economy, but if you could rely uh, less and less on our subsidies, that would be great, because there's a lot of things that I need to fund. That's kind of what the states wants from the railways as of now, and they try to find ways to the railways to sustain themselves. Sometimes they succeed, sometimes they don't. Mostly they don't. But it's important to kind of, in the end, make conditions so rail can extract its full potential and compete on a level playing field with all the other modes. And if they can't, well, you have to make the subsidies permanent, because if you don't have a level playing field, you always have a railway that can't reach their full potential.
Yeah, let me
Yeah,
add on that, Domingo. And
yeah,
so I do a lot of non-fare box or non-ticketing business projects, and then also benchmarking on sustainability of the companies. Yeah, quite interestingly, those that are very good at keeping themselves sustainable, the rail companies from the Far East or East Asians, like the likes of Japan, Hong Kong, MTR, and the likes, because their core business or the way they do business, actually they combine between property and rail.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's not just you do rail business and then you just try to integrate, for example, with the others. But the way I sort of like package this when I share to other people is that um, imagine that rail business is pretty much a loss business. You actually only incur costs. You don't get actually profit from that. So the way you get profit from that is actually to do other things, such as properties, for example. Or in Japan, they will also include like retails. In Thailand, they do
Yes.
advertising businesses and the likes. In Europe, they actually do pretty well on retail, but they don't focus so much on that. It seems
Mm.
to me that the way the business is that retail will sort of like cross subsidize, but still doesn't fully fulfill the financial gap. Whereas
Mm.
in the like in Japan and Hong Kong examples, they actually can manage to get profit out of those other businesses.
Yeah.
We try to mimic that, but it requires a lot of effort because you need to change the mindset, right, from like a rail and engineering operation into more like a business um,
Exactly.
propositions.
Yeah. In that case, you could end with rail goes farther than just trains. And
Yes, yes, indeed.
mhm. Yeah, and since the rail industry creates so much, uh, you could say create so much income, yet monetary and not monetary. You make attractive places for people to be stations and all that, and you can, yeah, monetize that with shops, offices, advertising, and all that. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Rail goes farther than just trains.
yeah. Okay, thank you so much. That's been very enlightening. I want to talk about something quite interesting. The pandemic. Okay,
Oh,
yeah, on the because it's affecting every sector. Okay, so I saw this. I saw this. This is a UK statistics that the impact of the pandemic in the UK railway was I think it reduced the number of trips made in rails, and you can see it. I think it was between 2019 to 2020. It was 23%. 22 okay 22.3% of the journey made in 2020. So that's about just 388 million journeys were made. That is in Great Britain. So can you people maybe possibly tell us what impact the pandemic had in your country's rail system, and possibly how it was managed? And nobody's planning for another pandemic, but we need to plan for the unseen purpose. What advice or what plans are in place just to prepare for future you know what I mean, future unforeseen acts. Also, yeah.
mm,
So anyone can go. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, let me go first because Domingo has been doing that a lot. So, so Indonesia case, for example, on the metro, the MRT systems in Jakarta, they're doing well because they're really good, I would say, in the non-ticketing business. And so if you know, do you know like naming rights, or what do you call it, like a sponsoring partner? So for example, if you don't select stadium or football stadium, they usually have a brand sponsor in the name, right? Like Etihad something, and then Wembley Stadium, things like that. It's actually being done in some parts of Asia, like Dubai, and then Malaysia, and in Indonesia. And somehow in Indonesia case for that MRT in Jakarta, they do it very well. That half of their income actually coming from that naming rights, almost half. And then the other 25% are actually coming from the advertising businesses or advertising concessions, because a lot of people are actually joining, even if there are not so many people, but still a very prestigious eyes, because those are like economic class high, because they are in the middle of the city centers. So
Um,
they're
uh,
sorry.
yeah, please go on. You can go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, so
Yeah.
they're doing very well in the non-fare box meals. On the national rail, on the other hand, they're actually not doing very well in terms of passengers, and they do incur more cost because of the hygiene stuff and all that. But they still get a lot of benefit from the, if I'm mistaken, the freight rail, because they do freight business, especially on the coal side. And with with COVID and then trading limitation and everything, the energy sector needs more coal than ever. I think you heard that as well. And because Indonesia is also a producer for that, there's a lot of businesses inside as well. So it sort of like covers the loss, or like a lot of loss for the state-owned enterprise, even though it's still a big impact, but they can still manage the financial sustainability, because with that freight rail service, especially on the coal side. But I don't know, if you add another 2 years, maybe they will collapse. But for now, they're doing good.
Yeah. In here in Chile, well, passengers dropped a lot, so it's kind of what happened in all around the world, but the cycle has kind of reversed. We have recovered most of our passengers in some services, and even though on some services they are even higher than by the start of the pandemic, because kind of the cycle was okay. You had passengers at this point, and then you have the big drop by the pandemic, and a lot of people switched to cars. And considering
Okay.
that, that only make the congestion on the roads worse. So that made an upswing for the railway to recover, and a lot of new people came to the railway in passenger. So railway has recovered pretty well, and in some cases we are kind of very close to get to pre-pandemic demand, and in other cases we are past a lot of months ago and that point, and we are in kind of very need of more capacity for the railway. So uh, the pandemic had a lot of like a lot of challenges for the railways all around the world, but depending on how they responded, they actually may be better that they were at the start of the pandemic. That depends on the type of operation, the type of public that they are looking for, and how it is the congestion on the roads besides them. So that's pretty much very important. In freight operations, they mostly stayed the same, didn't change very much. But some industries may have a little bit of a reduced demand, like containers from import and export, but mostly they remain the same. So kind of the main challenge right now is how to make railways in the case of passengers stronger than by the start of the pandemic. So because the pandemic kind of made a reset on mobility as a whole around the world.
Exactly.
So it was kind of a new opportunity to make a new beginning for the industry, or just break it. And it depends on politics and demand and all that surrounds it. Because as also rail doesn't end that with just trains, rail is not responsible. The responsibility of rail doesn't fall just in the rail companies themselves. It's also on the environment that surrounds them.
Okay. Thank you. Still speaking on passengers, I know you mentioned Domingos, that and you can also answer that their country is recovering, but don't you think? Because I think okay, what do you think? Because this pandemic has caused like a good change in terms of people are now working from home, and
Mhm.
people a lot of people are now doing a lot of employment is work from home, maybe flex working time, so which was not like the order of the day before. So do you think we will still have that much people using the rail transport, given the fact that things are really changing?
Mm. The thing is, sorry, Ruth.
Yeah, no
uh,
worries.
now the thing is, in the kind of the balance of people that uses the railway, there is a lot of a new people that comes from using the
Yeah,
railways from leisure, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
Instead of working. So right now the railway in the UK, for example, they are right now at kind of 80% of pre-pandemic demand, 80 to 90%, I think. And if business travelers were around 20 to 30% on pre-pandemic demand, right now it's closer to 20 and less than 20. And leisure passengers, it's kind of around 40% right now. And in some points even Saturdays are becoming peak. So people that are working from home and ending their jobs earlier may have more free time in the afternoon, for example, to do some leisure, or for example, having more time on Saturdays or Sundays to go out and do some stuff. So it's not there is some demand that is not going to come back. But what rail needs to do is to the considering the shift of needs from the people that use trains now, they had to, for example, they had to do a shift on services also, and how to approach these passengers, and how to approach the new mix of needs and passengers and freight that the pandemic is providing the railways. And also, uh, I don't think that the railways are prepared for a new shock, a new pandemic right now, a new quarantine, for example. But the states need to understand that in order to keep the mobility of a country that relies on railways, they have to chip in money if they need to, but they have to be prepared so it's not so sudden.
Yeah, from my end, Indonesia case, I think I was thinking that maybe the urban rail mobility or the commuting will be a little less, because I'm also doing a little less of rail travel due to this working from home.
Mhm.
Ah,
Oh.
okay, she's off. But anyway, we can just talk, right? Yeah, the life is still on. So yeah,
Yeah.
in my case, I think that works quite weird. I assume that maybe the intercity rail travel will be more, because you mentioned about the leisure travel and then flexibility of working from anywhere, perhaps, because that would be my intent. Now I can work from other countries that are like 200 kilometers away, and still connected to the work, still do the same work than before, so I can use like a further train. And then one thing that I haven't seen but I need the most in the rail sector in Indonesia right now is the reform of the timetable, and to give more like what do you call it, more well distributed trips schedule. Because
Mm.
in the peak hours, I will just need to wait for about 15 minutes, and 15 minutes is already too long, yeah, but it's 15 minutes. But in
Mhm.
the off peak hours, I need to wait for 45 minutes or an hour. Basically, I will just use my car then. Very
Yes.
very not competitive, but maybe I need that. So I was thinking that maybe the change would be like a smaller car, sorry, a less car in one train set. So currently like 12 set, maybe just 6 sets, but more often, so they can go more often, at least quite well distributed across the day. So I can travel at any time, because sometimes I go travel like 11 a.m. in the morning, or maybe 12.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, because right now, in some parts of the world, you are seeing like that the peaks are kind of vanishing as the concept of a peak. Instead of having just a big peak and then reduce demand, you kind of have more like distributed on the hours. And yeah, it's important to say that supply creates demand also in railways. So if you don't provide an attractive service, for example,
yeah,
if you have a peak of trains every 10 minutes and in off peak trains one train an hour, people won't consider rail as an alternative for cars because they are too wide in between the space between trains. So if you provide trains that are kind of with more trains an hour in off peak, that will also generate the demand that will let them sustain.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. I know you can see the chat from Jenny Martins. Do you want to
Yeah.
Yeah.
anyone to respond to that?
Yes, Luhut, do you want to say something about that before I
Yeah,
chip in?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, the last one was very interesting.
Mhm.
The closure on weekends, perhaps I'm not sure. In Indonesia case, for example, weekends are the times for mothers and the kids to go to
Only
leisure
mothers and
spaces.
kids?
Yeah,
Okay.
usually mothers and kids. Sometimes the dads also joining, but all I see is they're like mothers and kids because the dads perhaps want to take some holiday from traveling, commuting with rail. But you know what? It's a sort of like a pattern in which I think, in terms of closure for maintenance, maybe better to be well managed throughout the week. In terms of the leisure travel on the weekends, I would suggest that perhaps there are more leisure travel in the weekdays as well, so not just on the weekends. But definitely weekends will be less peak hour oriented than the weekdays. Um, but yeah, well, one thing that I want to share is that I was living in London for about 6 months, and I keep on getting information on TFL rail adjustment. Not sorry, yeah, adjustment for the timetable due to a lot of closure of maintenance, and I really appreciate that. At least I know things are happening because in Indonesia you don't know until it broke, right? And it happens sometimes quite a lot. So I think one of the things that I would like to add on the like change of timetable, and then the new way of doing rail, for example, and then rail reform is how the government or the operators actually doing communication with their passengers, and it's one of the
Mm.
things that me and communities that I'm joining actually complaining a lot with the government as well as the state and enterprises that do the rail, is that the communications are not that transparent and not that effective, so that the people that using that actually have to bear all the consequences of their own mistake in starting up times for maintenance or even bad asset management that result in what do you call it, derailment and such. There are a lot of things and issues, and it becomes very interesting because this is the right time for me to enter this market, right? When there are problems, there are consultants, right? And there are money.
Mm.
Okay, Domingo.
Well, thanks for your question, Jenny. I think it's a very important thing because especially for urban railways, the sometimes the weekends are an afterthought because they kind of focus on the weekdays, and in the weekends it's like, yeah, okay, we have some services, but you can kind of disregard some services to do some maintenance. But
Mhm.
as Saturdays are becoming a new peak, especially Saturday mornings,
Yeah.
that also puts some pressure on, okay, I don't have that much freedom, you could say, to do some maintenance as I would like to in the weekends. And that puts also pressure on the costs of the railway because if the peaks are more distributed along the day and in the weekend, you kind of have some problems with trying to make maintenance and not affect everyone. So the railways have to maybe distribute a little bit more of the maintenance work maybe on the night, and that will be also more costly. But if we are trying to keep the new demand that the railway is attracting, maybe that's the way to go, at least for a couple of years, so that demand can sustain itself. Because there's an example that I like to use here in Chile. Railway has to kind of work as a spider, kind of weave its net and try to attract and make people depend on you, because that will make that new demand keeps coming to the railway. And for example, from especially on loss making services that kind of lose money but have a very important degree of social integration or social benefit, if some maybe some state-owned administrations want to shut them off, If people rely on the railways, they could make a case for a subsidy, for example, because sometimes railways are prey to politics that don't look in the long term. So that's also important to make rails use their capacity to work for the society, and not just the other way around.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. And we are already getting the close of the discussion. So I want to, first of all, before I get back to my speakers, to say thank you to our audience. If you have a final question or contribution, please do well to drop on the comments. And I want to say thank you to our very engaging participants. You guys have been amazing. So back to our speakers, Louis and Domingos. What's the take home? What do you want to tell people out there? Any like key points? Any like what you want them to call for attention, or just whatever last giveaway for the day you want to give to the people. Yeah.
So yeah, let me go first. Yeah, so that Domingo can close that. So from my end, I think what's very important is that to put the users or the citizen at the center, especially in the policy making, and then doing the rail business. Sometimes when you're coming from the regulator's point of view or the operator's point of view, what you seek is actually, or your end result orientation is quite different. In government, perhaps they will see on the subsidy size, they want to reduce the subsidy, they want to give pressure to the operators to give more and more and more dividends to some extent, or perhaps like throughput. On the operator side, they want to see their revenue and then profit going up. Sometimes they don't really care about the passengers, especially when talking about, in some urban transport, you see a lot of people cramped into, the cars, and it's good for the operators, but maybe not very good to the users, right? So yeah, so thinking about the users first, maybe we'll provide more insights on how to do better rail transport. And I'm always advocating this aspect, especially when talking with policymakers and operators, when they talk too much about the subsidies and all that, and they care less about the actual people that use that. Sometimes it comes to that position because these people don't actually use rail. They don't know. They don't know
Yeah.
the sacrifice and the struggle that we have every day. So
Yeah.
maybe the whole rail reform should be centered on the users. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Thank you.
from my side.
Thank you.
Yeah.
To me.
Very, very good points. And to complement that, make a compliment on that, it's like I would like to go back to what we were discussing at the start. If you want to make reforms on the railway, you have to understand, well, you want to reform what. It's not like you need to make reforms just for the sake of making them. And when you work in the railways, you have to keep an eye on the economics on rail, but also on how to change them. It's not like they are going to change uh, just in a couple of minutes, or a year, or maybe 2 years. You have to keep attracting people to the railway to make them their journeys, for example, in passenger railways, easier, and looking things like crowding, speeds, capacity, supply. And in that case, what you will make in the long term is that more people organically get to the railway, more freight organically gets to the railway if you provide a good service, and a good stream of investment. And that will make that in the long term you don't need subsidy. What it's important is that the railways can thrive in the places that they are more efficient, and kind of untap all the potential that they have. And for that, you have to be consistent, and reforms need to be done where it's really needed, and not just for the sake of making them because it's attractive for the policymakers, or just to copy something that they saw in Europe, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. This reminds me of the course I took. It's called Global Transferability Policy, Luhut. I think we're on the same class together. Yeah. You don't just copy. Yeah, that's amazing. We all took the course together. Global transferability policy. You don't just copy one thing and paste it in that country. You need to understand the context and understand why the policy was made in the first place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
we
yeah,
were in
yeah.
a course. We were in a course of application of of policies around the world. We saw some examples from
Yeah.
Brazil, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was at the BRT, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And I think it was about the is it the city was a bit was waterlogged or a water city, and I can't remember, but yeah.
Yeah,
But I
yeah,
remember it's Professor Prof Paul, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
Doctor.
We made we talked about some cities. We did something on Bandung. I recall if I
Yeah,
recall
yeah, yeah, yeah. I
correctly.
did
Yeah.
that. I did that. I did that, guys. Yeah, I
Well,
love it.
well, it's been an amazing time. I want to
Yeah.
say thank you so much to us because honestly, first of all to Luhut, I know it's quite late in Indonesia, so thank you. And Domingos will woke you up from the bed. We are so sorry, but we say thank you
No, no,
because
no.
like,
It's fine.
what's
It's
the
fine.
best time to do this? Because night and morning really world apart. So and to our wonderful audience, it's been an insightful um discussion. So thank you so much, and we hope those of us that mistake us at work when you also watch the the conversation, you also have an appreciation of for it. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a good day, and have a good morning, and have a good night.
Thank you, Jira. Thank you,
Bye bye.
Domingo.
Thank you, everyone. A pleasure to see you both. Thank you
Guys.